their loved ones. And Waziri, I want us to revisit our conversation because the Cabinet Dispatch says the members commended security officers, pointing out that they, on the whole, acted professionally in very difficult circumstances. The Cabinet also noted that security agencies did a good job of protecting the country from anarchists. When you listen to those families there speaking, and the stories that have been told about the circumstances in which they died, including Rex Masai, these are people that on their way home, some of them had been on the streets peacefully demonstrating. How did they become anarchists?
I'm sure that dispatch is not discussing the people whose families are talking there. Mm-hmm. That dispatch is saying, which I would like to reiterate, one, that we had serious security breach in the last 2 weeks when peaceful demonstrations were hijacked by criminal gangs, very dangerous criminal gangs, mm-hmm. who did what they did. And the loss of life that was occasioned in during those protests is regrettable. Right. I think if you look at that dispatch, I don't know whether you've seen a sentence that sends the collective condolences of the Cabinet of Kenya, mm-hmm. Which I still reiterate, even in my personal capacity as the Interior Minister. It should not have happened. And the death of a single Kenyan is painful enough. It's a big loss to the country. But at the same time, this country has a constitution and is governed by the rule of law. The people who invaded Parliament, for example, and mm-hmm. attempted to raise it down.
No, we'll get to the question of Parliament.
Just a minute. You asked me about anarchists. And
sorry,
I told you
I'm asking specifically about the people that... We'll get to the question of Parliament, but allow me...
Anarchists are the people who try to overthrow the constitution, yeah. and try to overturn constitutional order, mm-hmm. by doing what they did. The anarchists is not
Rex died
people who...
on a Thursday, way before the breach of Parliament on 25th.
Yes, I've said, if any death occurred outside the law, there will be accountability. It's as simple as that.
And you said that...
but on the overall,
yep.
our officers did their best in the circumstances. Some of them got hurt. I've mm-hmm. already told you 43 of them. Mm-hmm. And we really commend them, okay. Those officers who did what they did within the law. Right. But if there were any excesses, the mechanisms of accountability are there. And they
I'm struggling with something. I'm trying to search the dispatch or the communication that came from the cabinet meeting. I cannot see the condolences, but maybe it happened. If it happened, what was the tone?
The tone is what you see from me here. That is the tone.
Which is because I would...
regret.
One would imagine... Oh, sorry, regret?
Yeah.
One would imagine that if that is the position of the cabinet, as you communicate about the anarchists, you'd also communicate about the condolences, some empathy on the families that lost their loved ones.
I don't know which version you're using, because I think the spokesman of the State House did issue a media a brief ahead of that dispatch, mm-hmm. and whether perhaps in the summary that you have there, the condolences are there or not, I just want to say that the cabinet did appreciate that Kenyans died, expressed regret, but at the same time appreciated that security officers did their best to make sure that the injury and the loss of life was mitigated. It could have been worse without the intervention.
So tell me, because some families have already started burying their kin and they are demanding justice, what would justice look like to them?
Justice means accountability. Any death outside the law must be accounted for. As I've said, of all the 25 Kenyans who lost their lives, we have an account for each one of them. Mm-hmm. A file has been opened for each one of them. I have perused those files already. Of course, the investigations are still ongoing, because if a bullet, for example, is used to injure or fatally shoot someone, it is important to trace the source of the bullet and the type of gun, and therefore trace who is licensed to hold that gun. And so it's a scientific process. I have complete faith in the people carrying the investigations. I have faith in the oversight institutions established under the law, including the Independent Police Oversight Authority, and even the Kenya National Human Rights Commissions, that between all these agencies and our own investigations, the truth will be established.
Okay.
It is not rocket science to find out who shot someone.
Okay.
There are instances, I have seen one of the files where criminals took guns from 2 police officers, stripped them of their uniform, used those guns to shoot at a crowd, and when reinforcement on the 2 officers who were actually guarding the bank and the supermarket was being looted nearby. So when another gang came, overpowered them, took the guns, started shooting at the crowd, took their uniform, and 2 of them, by the way, the 2 of them are still in hospital, APC Ashoto and APC Omondi. They are actually in hospital, Sinai Hospital. One of them is in critical condition. And when reinforcement came, there was a shootout now between the police officers who had come for reinforcement and the people who had snatched the gun. In Rongai. In Rongai. I have seen one of the cases, and I'm actually explaining the case of Kennedy Ouma Onyango. 15-year-old boy who was shot in Rongai. And therefore, it is important to establish, for example, in that exchange of fire between the reinforcement team and the criminals who had overpowered the 2 officers whom I have named. We have their service numbers, we have the kind of rifles they were carrying, and the rounds of ammunition that they had taken, because we have a register of ammunition. So in an exchange like that one, it is very easy to trace who had possession of the gun that shot the boy. Is it the criminals? Is it the police officers who had come for reinforcement? So I think we need to have faith that between us and our oversight institutions that oversight the police, justice will be done, and we have nothing to hide.
Right.
Anybody goes
so the events of
out of the law, they will be...
Which day was this?
It was on Tuesday.
Tuesday 25th.
No, 27th.
So that is Thursday. Thursday 27th.
Yeah.
And today is the 4th.
Correct.
So it's just about 7 days or thereabouts.
Absolutely.
How about Rex? 7 days before. There's CCTV footage showing what is believed to be a police officer shooting at him.
Well, the investigation file is incomplete, and I think what we want to do is to apply the homicide department, which I think is already put up a file, but it's quite incomplete. I have seen the post-mortem report, but I think that is a matter that will require a little bit more investigation, because even the ones I've given you about Rongai, it's still incomplete.
Yeah, it's work in progress.
Because the scene of crime still has a lot of evidentiary acoustics and ballistic material, which is subject to analysis. I'm
just asking that because there are police officers involved. 7 days later, you have a report. A civilian was shot 7 days earlier, so it's been 2 weeks.
No, we have a report on every case.
All right.
I've told you, every case of them. I just highlighted that. And the reason I highlighted that case is simple. To tell you, here were police officers armed, protecting a bank, overpowered by criminals who took their gun and started shooting at the police and protesters. So that bullet could even have come from the gun of a police officer. But the trigger was not pulled by a police officer.
All right.
So that investigation requires to be given time. And I want to assure...
Do you have an estimate?
Some criminal investigation is not a small matter.
Sure.
Yeah, it's not an easy matter.
But because families are waiting, they're burying their key in.
They'll
Is
get
there
accountability.
A reasonable promise?
They'll get accountability. Once, you know, it's easy to assign responsibility and take someone to court and the case collapses on the face of the record.
So how soon should you see arraignment then?
As soon as possible. I'm engaged with the DCI and the IG on a daily basis. I have requested them to expedite this process and bring closure as soon as possible.
Tell me, because in some of those images, you see that there are people who are not wearing uniforms or police uniforms, they are in civilian. How are people supposed to react? And how do you tell this is a police officer, this is not, even as you conduct investigations?
Crowd control policing is different from other policing activities, including crime prevention, policing activities. And a police officer does not become a police officer if he's wearing a uniform. He's a police officer because he's a police officer. But the short answer to your question is that crowd control policing techniques are very different because of the nature of the engagement. And what we have witnessed, I think, in the past 2 weeks, have told us that the organization of crimes is quite high around opportunistic people who want to bring down the country. So we've learned our lessons, and the short answer is that we had police in uniform and other officers who are not in uniform, and there's nothing irregular about that.
Okay. All right. And we'll continue this conversation. There are so many issues that are coming up, including the questions of abduction, the breach of parliament, and of course, the Kenya Defence Force's deployment to different towns in this country. We have the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Kindiki. We are back with